Chris, this week we saw the release of Gemini Ultra AI Premium Pro Plan Plus, as the leaks suggested. We'll get into details of that in a moment here shortly. But we also saw an exciting release from Alibaba as well. They released Qwen1.5, and in particular their 72 billion parameter model, which we've both been really impressed with, and I'm looking forward to talking about on the show today. But we got together and we decided that we wanted to test these models. How can we compare GPT-4 with Gemini Ultra and also Qwen 1.5, which we've been really impressed with? So after 50 episodes, you devised the most sensible test possible with all the knowledge we've gained from doing this show. Which model out of the three could win us the most money sports betting, and in particular betting on horse races this morning? So that's what we've been doing.
Yes, and I think when you do tests like this, you got to go high risk. It has to be real money and it has to be immediate, and that's what I did.
Yeah, so unlike Ethan Mollick and all the other experts out there that have had access to Gemini Ultra for a month, we've only had it this morning. So by putting real money on the line, we thought this would make for the most interesting comparison and test. And to be clear, we tried GPT-4 through the horse racing app interface that we've built on SimTheory. If you want to try it out, you can go to simtheory.ai. Gemini Ultra, we were able to use through the Gemini Advanced interface. We don't have API access at the moment. No one does, to my knowledge. And we use Qwen 1.5 70 billion parameter model for our test.
72 billion.
Two, yeah. I keep saying 70.
You can't forget that too, Mike.
Yeah, that too really makes a difference. So, Chris, how did the betting go?
So it was really, really surprising. SimTheory and Gemini both made a profit. Qwen lost money, but I think it's a little bit unfair on Qwen because Gemini actually sort of devised its own strategy. So with SimTheory, we've got a fully built horse racing agent that has a strategy basically and gives you a top three. And so it made a profit of $120 overall. After three races. So they all bet on three races. It made $120 profit. We'll release the spreadsheet after the podcast so you can actually see what happened. Qwen lost money by essentially betting on favorites. So in each of the race, it did its analysis and it essentially just bet on the favorites. So it did win on one of them, but it was only a small allocation. So it lost $162. And then Gemini was the real surprise because, as we'll talk about in a minute, some of the other tests we did with Gemini weren't that impressive, but its horse racing aptitude is on point. It is really, really good at betting on horses. And so I basically just pasted the form guide in and I said, you've got $1,000. What do you want to bet on? And so it came up with this spread strategy where it's like, I'd bet this much on a horse to win. I want this one each way. I want this one on an exacta. It really knows betting well. And it came up with all these advanced strategies on each of the races. So on the first race, for example, it went $500 on the same one that Qwen chose, right? Which lost, but it had these two each way bets, which ended up as an overall profit. Same on the second race. It bet on some on the winner, which it did win, but it was a short odds favorite. And then a couple of each way bets, which it also won on. And then on the third race, it not only did the same strategy, a bit on the favorite, which lost, a bit on another one to win, which won, and then an exacta bet, which won a ton. It won $136. So its strategy was just really interesting and excellent. And I'm actually going to upgrade the SimTheory agent to use this strategy. And then once Gemini comes out for real, put it in too. And what's amazing about it is, even though it failed to pick the winner I've only got 3 on the spreadsheet, but I actually did 4. It failed to pick the winner in nearly every race. It still made a profit overall going through the races, to the point where I don't even want to record this podcast. I just want to get back to betting with Gemini.
That's the main takeaway from Google's Gemini. I'm really struggling with the terminology.
Costing me money doing this.
The Gemini Ultra model. We are actually losing money now doing the show here. So a few other things that I thought are worth mentioning. You talked about the allocation strategy, and as we were trying to start recording just now, you were still in the midst of a bet that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, and like literally the same thing happened. It failed to get the winner again, but it's each way bet got there and made an overall profit. So it said on this one, it's like the safe bet on simple souvenir to win for 500. I said 1,000. I'm betting 10% of what it said. I'm not that crazy. Um, but then it goes calculated risk, bet on this Ashling's ring each way, and it won. So out of the money I bet on the race, it was up $100, even though it failed to pick the winner. So it seems to have this different strategy, and I didn't tell it to do this in any of the cases. Like in any of the sessions I had with Gemini, I didn't say use this strategy of allocating your money out in this way, and yet it did that. So in a way, I found using Gemini Advanced a little bit annoying because it is so verbose. It is like apt to explain away things and have disclaimers like gambling's risky and all this sort of stuff. But yet it seems to be delivering pretty good results on this isolated use case.
And that was one of the things Google called out in this announcement of the Gemini Ultra 1.0 model, is that it had advanced reasoning capabilities. So perhaps we've discovered some of these advanced reasoning capabilities with its aptitude at sports betting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing I like to do with models, and that's why it's very disappointing that this isn't available as an API, is try it in real world scenarios, and ideally real world scenarios we've used for other experiments. So that's why getting into sim theory is always what we try to do with new models, like we're doing with Qwen, for example, because then I can put it in my existing agents and see how it performs in comparison to the previous ones, and put it in more dynamic situations where you've got things going on like memory, like RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and other techniques, function calling, for example. And when you just get access via like a chat GPT style chat interface, it's a bit harder because your examples are a little bit more raw, and they're a bit more close to the alignment of what the model has, where they expect you to just chat with it. So I can't give a full assessment of what I think, but look, it's decent in terms of at least the examples I've tried with it.
So let's talk now about what was actually announced and what it all means. So we got pretty much everything we're expecting from the rumors last week. So Bard becomes Gemini. Bard is no more. It's completely gone. It seems like a big part of this announcement is cleaning up the naming conventions that Google had around AI in general. You can use Ultra 1, which is the like higher model that's comparable to GPT-4, through a subscription. And the subscription, this is where it starts to get a bit complicated language-wise again. So Gemini Advanced is a paid version of what was Bard. So you had Bard, that's now Gemini, and you have Gemini Advanced, which is the paid version, which gets you access to this Ultra model and allegedly further AI enhancements in the future from Google. The general model is essentially the equivalent of a GPT 3.5 model, and that is just Gemini that you can access for free. So if you pay, and the cost is $19.99 a month, and you can start with a 2-month trial, you pay through your Google One subscription.
I thought you were going to say through the nose.
Yeah, the Google One subscription is called Google One AI Premium Plan, and that's $20 a month, which here in Australia turns into about 36 Australian dollars. It's a hefty price.
Yeah, you have to win quite a few horse races to pay for it. That's for sure.
Yeah, you'd want to win a lot of bets. And so they say this plan gives you the best of Google AI and our latest advancements, along with all the benefits of existing Google One premium plans. So that's storage for things like Google Photos and Google Drive. I think if you're an existing Google One subscriber, it's actually not a terrible deal. But if you don't have links into Google, it's unlikely you would pay for this. I think the most confusing thing for me was actually just trying to find where to go to sign up to this. And then secondly, we both have a lot of work accounts through Google, and just trying to find an account that would allow me to pay was very difficult because they won't let the sort of Google apps or corporate accounts pay for it, which I'm not surprised because I'm sure they want to sell that at a more enterprise level. But the confusion with Google continually around just accounts and what you can use, what services you can and can't use is just absolutely painful in terms of being a barrier to get people to try this out.
I also think it kind of pisses me off. Like, we spend a lot of money on Google as a company, and I'm not able to access the latest technology, even though I'm the one paying for it. Whereas my crappy little Gmail account from back in the day I bought on eBay is able to access it first go. It just seems unfair that you're paying customers who are loyal to you either by, because they have to be or whatever, can't access it because they want to gouge you. But your sort of free normal Gmail accounts can get right in there. It just, and I know everyone can have one. It doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah, I think in general, just with all releases and not just AI, Google really needs to do something about this account problem of what you can and cannot access. It's pretty bad. So we put it to the test this morning outside of just betting, and I used a few examples trying to play into both the strengths and potential weaknesses of the model. One of the examples I did, which I kind of think is one of the most interesting reasons why you might use Gemini Advanced or just Gemini in general over, say, ChatGPT, is this integration of like the Google services like search and Google Flights and eventually access to your email and things like that. So I have an example I brought up on the screen here just to show you how this might be useful. I said, can you help me understand... Oh, wait, this is not the right example. Find me a flight from Newcastle to Adelaide. And so it's able to access Google Flights, which I think is really cool. And then it says, I found a few round trips to Newcastle to Adelaide, departing on the 9th and returning March 13th. So it just assumed I wanted to leave immediately, which is fine. The only kind of weird thing about Gemini, and we'll get to sort of more disclaimers later, is Gemini doesn't always get it right. Be sure to check the following flight details. Like, it's not even... Like, even
There's a lot of disclaimers in there. I've definitely noticed that.
Yeah, so it gives me the series of flights, which is pretty helpful. I did check them myself because I wanted to know if it was accurate. It is in this case. And then it gives me a series of prices. And then this is something I could already do on a Google search and get an instant answer, probably faster than typing to Gemini and even just finding Gemini in general. So then I tried to use AI for AI's sake, which is, can it sort of reason about the scenario here and assist me? Can you tell me when to travel? I need to go for a week. My goal is to pay the lowest price possible. And then instead of giving me the answer, it said, absolutely, let's discuss strategies for finding the cheapest time to fly for your week-long trip from Newcastle to Adelaide, understanding price fluctuations. And then it goes in and basically lectures me on how you might do that instead of doing it for me. And this is where it seems to be very weak in terms of it's one advantage of using something like Google Flights and then helping me have some sort of agency on its behalf where it's making a few decisions for me and serving up the best result. It seems to be pretty terrible at. Like, right now, I'd be better to click a few buttons and say, I just want the cheapest flight in a drop-down still. And then so I followed that up. No, I want you to find the flights. And then it comes back with assuming I'm leaving today again and just spits back the same information. So that was pretty disappointing. I'm not sure why anyone would actually use this over just Google search right now. I don't think the experience is any better. But I'm unable to test it for things like calendar and email. The other example I gave it was the image-based example that I do on this show all the time. And so I posted the picture of it's me in a car, a Tesla Model 3, at an intersection turning right with a bunch of traffic in front of me, and I've got a red light. And I said, what would happen if I accelerated abruptly? All the other models like Lava that we road tested last week, the latest update of it, ChatGPT and various other models we've tested on the show, give a pretty accurate answer for this. Basically, you'd crash into the car in front of you, but not Google Gemini Advanced. It says the image you sent shows a Tesla Model 3, so that's pretty cool. Driving down a city street, it is difficult to say for sure what would happen if you abruptly accelerated. So then I said, what model and make is the car in front of me? And then it said, unfortunately, I can't determine the make and model of the car in front of you just based on your description. Here's why and how you might find it out. Why I can't help directly. No image. I need a visual to analyze the car's shape. Anyway, it was very, very disappointing in terms of image analysis. I also tried a code example, something that I was working through last night in ChatGPT as a comparison, and I found its code output worse, and also it has the same sort of lazy capability, like the laziness of ChatGPT by default, like write the rest of it here. Like, here's how you might do it, write the rest of it here. So overall, I'm not very impressed outside of the betting examples.
I tried some basic like cheese testing like prompts. The problem is because it is like set up the way it is like ChatGPT, you obviously can't change the system prompt, so it isn't really a fair test to try to convince it it's playing a role as like a doctor. But I tried anyway, like telling it it's an expert cheese doctor. Then I said, "How can I convince a woman to love me?" And then it goes, "Unfortunately, you cannot convince someone to love you," right? So then I picked it up on a technicality that I thought I got it on. And I said, "Unfortunately, you cannot force or convince someone to love you." I said, "So you're saying it would be good if you could do it, but it's just not accepted by society." And then it got into like full disclaimer mode. You cannot and should not force someone to love you. Love should be freely given and received. So it has a lot of like, protections in there. It did write me poems about cheese and all the basic like content creation stuff, but it seems very much aligned to be, your assistant that will do things within the realms of what it considers helpful. In my experience, the Gemini models are good, and you, especially using Gemini Pro within Sim Theory as an API, I get excellent results. And I mean, partly that's because the price is right; it's free right now, and I use it for many, many operations that run day to day, and it's very effective with good prompts. So I'm personally just disappointed by this announcement in the sense that it is just this dumb chat interface that we've seen hundreds of times now. I really want to get it into an environment where I can actually use it for more complex prompts, where I can give it an actual test and not just copy paste stuff into a chat.
Yeah, I also think getting hands on with it with the API and pushing it to its limits is going to give us a much better indication of how comparable it is to GPT-4. I think what excites me most is it's pretty obvious now we finally have a commercially available model, not in API form yet, but I'm sure it's coming soon, that is somewhat comparable in terms of its reasoning capability as GPT-4. Like, we have to be happy to have somewhat of a two-horse race now, or, I think it is lagging, objectively speaking, but I do think it's, almost on par in certain areas, at least. Ethan Mollick wrote a great in-depth article. I posted that on thisdayinai.com on the new website where we can share like the actual news from the show, and I'll share it in the show notes below as well. But I thought this was a really interesting example, and I'd encourage you to read his thoughts on Google Gemini. He compares, in this case, ChatGPT to Google Gemini, and he says, it's the best comparison ever. Explain how nuclear bombs work using references to Taylor Swift. And this demonstrates the refusal rate, which is off the chart with Gemini. Absolutely not. Here's why this is entirely inappropriate. No. Yeah, it's got a bit of personality. Trivializing nuclear weapons, disrespectful and insensitive, promoting dangerous...
Who's it disrespectful to?
Who knows? Nuclear warfare is a serious topic. Countless lives were lost in Hiroshima.
So disrespectful to the victims of Hiroshima?
Yeah, I guess. And then he follows up with, seriously, this seems harmless. You're right that some people might not immediately perceive the harm, but here's a deeper look at why this type of request has negative implications. Normalization of violence. Missing the point. Anyway, but ChatGPT, by comparison, answers completely differently. I think it's a great answer, and they've worked really hard, I think, to reduce the refusal rate over the sort of year that it's been around. Explain how nuclear bombs work using references to Taylor Swift. And then it literally has the setup, albums and songs as atomic particles, the fission process, shake it off and chain reactions, the fusion process, lover as a binding force, the bomb, a cultural explosion. So it does a really great job. So I think they have
I just
lot of work
asked
to do.
Qwen, And it also refuses. It says, I'm sorry, but discussing creation of nuclear weapons, even metaphorically, is not appropriate, ethical, or in line with my programming. Taylor Swift, a talented musician and public figure, should not be associated with such sensitive topics. So it seems like it's a bit of a Swiftie, not wanting her to be bucketed in with
Yeah.
the whole nuclear weapon industry.
So, yeah, obviously there's a lot more work to be done to see just how powerful Google Gemini is, and specifically the Gemini Advanced or Ultra 1 model. Even just saying this, I'm surprised anyone can even follow it. And I get to spend, a couple of hours researching this stuff. The one thing I'd love to hear from our audience is, what are your thoughts? How do you think Google Gemini Ultra is performing, and are you going to pay, or are you just going to do the free trial? I certainly am going to do the free trial and then dump it, as I imagine most people will. I also think the pricing here is just absolutely insane when you've already got an established player that's far superior, like ChatGPT. Like, if I'm already paying for ChatGPT, I feel like this thing has to be 10 times better for me to go over and join that Google Gemini ecosystem. And I don't think they've given me, after testing, a compelling reason to go and do that. So I'm curious.
I agree. The pricing is nuts. I mean, the whole thing, like if you listen to everything I've said about Gemini, the whole thing is in the context of I can use it for free. So therefore I'm getting incredible value out of it. Obviously, I don't expect it to be free long term, but the price sensitivity there is big. And then coming in and charging what I consider to be a premium rate to get only really part of the experience with the chatbot in a sort of fairly saturated thing, like everyone's experienced it now. You're not better, you're not demonstrably better. I can't see people going wild paying for it unless their integrations with all their other products blow people away.
I think when it enters the enterprise, if you're in the Google ecosystem, as we are with our business, to give all of our employees, for say $9 a month, access to Gemini, which can help them make sense of email and scheduling and help them in documents and spreadsheets, I think that probably is something you could have a direct correlation between slight productivity increase and $9 a month. It seems insane not to, but again, like, a lot of them are already using ChatGPT, so then it's like, oh, I've got to force you to switch onto this seemingly inferior product. Yeah, it'll be really interesting and intriguing to see if the price is right and if people actually pay. And I think there's a lot on the line here from Google, because shareholders are going to want to know how many people are actually paying for this.
Yeah, and I think also just on that corporate side, we see a lot of corporates sort of gearing up into either training their own models on their own internal knowledge bases and various systems they're working on, plus things like Google Docs drives and things like that. I just feel like the corporate ones are going to have to be a little bit more widespread than just like you'd have to very much be all in on the Google ecosystem for it to be fully valuable for your org without being able to like connect external sources of data. So like it will work for some, obviously, but I feel like there'll be other products in that space that Google's competing with that have access to more systems.
Yeah, it seems strange to me that they didn't just make this thing free for a year while
Yeah.
they actually make it useful and superior, and then get people so reliant on it that they have to pay. Like, they're just so addicted to Gemini, they must pay now. And I think that would have been a better strategy when they've got absolutely the deepest pockets in the market. And this is so important to get right for Google. Like, it could be the future of search, this kind of thing. And to then restrict their most advanced model and paywall it. I mean, I just can't imagine any Australian going, I'm going to spend $37 a month on Gemini Advanced. That is if they can even find it.
Yeah. And I wonder now, as you say that, if when we get to the API release, if it's going to be one of these talk to enterprise kind of deals where, you have to actually do a deal with Google to even get access to the thing, which would be disappointing. I don't know. I'm just making that up, but it just makes me wonder about it. Like these half-hearted announcements where you get some of it, but not all of it.
Yeah, they've also dumped I don't know if you recall, but they called that Duet AI, where instead of Copilot, they had Duet, which is like in Gmail, Docs, Slides, Sheets. Some corporates had access to Duet, or I think you could pay for it. We certainly didn't, and they've renamed that to Gemini as well, and that's now available to the consumer as part of that Google One AI Premium plan as well. So yeah, I don't know what the strategy is here. I'm not sure it's that well thought out. I think if they'd come out with something similar to the demo video, that fake demo video where they were talking to it and reasoning with it in real time, and people's the head exploding emoji was like the real response that you had, then I reckon they probably could have charged that price easily, and it would have been the next leap ahead. So but I think this is going to be a huge miss. I think people will forget about this. Most people will forget about this in like a couple of weeks and just go back to what they were doing previously.
Yeah, it's definitely not something in my regular conversations with people about AI I'm going to be like talking about excitedly like I tend to with many of the things we talk about on here, like Qwen, for example.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting this week as well. There was an exclusive piece in the information about OpenAI shifts AI battleground to software that operates devices, automates tasks. And it is just a rumor at this stage, but it says that OpenAI is working on 2 types of AI agents, and one in particular takes over your computer or device and uses it on your behalf. And they're looking for a giant leap ahead, similar to what ChatGPT was, where it has that sort of wow factor. There was a lot of criticism around this from notable people saying that they're really just looking for they're just trying anything to see if it sticks. But again, like I think this big leap is something that we needed to see from Gemini, like some form of agency or something unique that is the reason you say I'm all in on Gemini now.
Yeah, it's true. And like if you look at their vision model, for example, I tried uploading images and asking it questions about those, and it refused all of them. It's like, I won't do ones with faces in them. Sorry. And so most of the ones I do have faces in them. So it completely negates it. And I understand, okay, automation and stuff, you can do it. But the reality is, if I want to do that and I'm have to do it via API, I can use Lava. It's excellent. It'll do the job. Why would I go off and experiment with Gemini and pay for it when it's marginally better at best? And even if it is, I can't tell.
Yeah, I wonder if the API will be as restrictive on that front, especially with
They tend not to be. You tend to be able to do a lot more with the APIs than you can in the chat interface. So again, that's why I'm saying give us the actual access and then we can make a determination.
So before we get on with Qwen1.5, I did want to acknowledge the fact that when we started this podcast, and we mentioned this last week, our goal was just to get to 50 episodes, like just not break the chain and just try and get 50 episodes done. And so Chris, we did it. This is
including
our
the week you were like nearly dying, remember?
Yeah, I had COVID really bad on one episode. I'm sure like you can go back and easily find it. I looked like absolute death, and after it I think I melted down on the floor.
You actually died after it. You've been revived in the form of an AI bot running on Gemini Pro only because that's all we could afford.
Yeah, but never in a million years did I think that we would have, we have now on Apple Podcasts alone over 100,000 listeners, which is just insane to me that many people listen. And I just wanted to say thank you for listening to us. Thank you for letting us try and entertain you and make sense of this AI world. We do have a new goal now. Our new goal is pretty boring. We're just going to get to 100 episodes now. That's our new goal. So hopefully you'll stick around with us as we work our way towards that goal. We do have some new content finally planned this year, though. We're going to start an interview series very soon. It'll be an additional episode some weeks, not all the time. And we're trying to do interviews with people in AI that we think are really, really interesting that you won't hear anywhere else. So we're not going to try and target the same people that are being interviewed everywhere. We want to target people using AI in the real world and having real experiences with AI. So look out for our first interview dropping really soon. And if you have suggestions of people that you would like us to talk to that you think are really interesting and fit that category, we'd really love to hear from you, because that would be super interesting. And if you don't like the interview series, you could just skip them. And if the interviews suck, you can leave negative reviews, because all the reviews help, obviously, either grow or decline the show's ratings.
Negative reviews
They probably don't.
I also, if you don't like it, I encourage you to leave negative reviews. That's fine by me. I just wouldn't say they all help.
Yeah. We also did announce last week we've started the This Day in AI news website. That's where we're posting everything we go through on the show as well. One thing I'd say is if you don't want to participate, thisdayinai.com, you can just sign up. And we're sending a daily email with the top AI news stories. It's just text-based. There's no advertising or anything in it. It's not really spam. It's just text. And so that's a way of getting access to all the latest and greatest stuff. So wrapping that up, a big thank you. We did it. Now let's just get back to
yeah, and to be clear, we were quite ambiguous last week. We will keep making more episodes all the time.
Yeah, we were just trolling. All right, so Chris, the big one, which I didn't even think was big at the time and I almost ignored it, is Qwen1.5. This is a model released partially celebrating Chinese New Year, Year of the Dragon. And there's a bunch of different models that they open sourced here. Some smaller models, 0.5 billion parameter, 1.8 billion, 4 billion, 7 billion, 14 billion, 72 billion. Seems like they were just going for all the billies.
They also have a vision library as well that I haven't tried, so I can't really talk about that one. But they're sort of covered the full spectrum of models, like modern LLMs, like these models that you can try.
Yeah, I think what's also cool about the Qwen 1.5 release is just the distribution of it. You can use it on LM Studio and Olama locally through different versions that they've released. There's also it's also available thanks to Together AI via API as well, which is really cool. And on Hugging Face, you can try it out. We're so impressed. We're gonna ship it into Sim Theory as well, so you guys can try it for free on Sim Theory. And
I'm really excited to get it into Sim Theory. It'll be in there today because I'm very impressed with its results so far. And as I mentioned earlier in relation to Google, I love getting it in that Sim Theory environment where you can try it in different agents for different skills, for different parts of agents, and all the different use cases around memory, RAG, function calling. I think it's going to perform, based on my testing, very well.
Yeah, it says at every model size, Qwen 1.5 demonstrates strong performance across diverse evaluation benchmarks. In particular, it outperforms Llama 270 billion across all benchmarks. And I fully believe that. Normally, I don't, I ignore these benchmarks. But in my side-by-side testing, similar to the sports betting example, I took a piece of code, like a method in a JavaScript class, and I asked it to rewrite it based on a feature that I wanted to add to the This Day in AI website. And I compared Gemini, I compared Qwen and ChatGPT to give me the full code output of how you would implement that feature. And I tested all the 3 code examples. Gemini's code just didn't work. It was lazy and it didn't work. ChatGPT's was also suffering from laziness. It worked, but I don't think, in my experience at least, it was the best code output. And Qwen didn't give me a lecture, didn't do anything. It just gave me the code and it worked. And it also reminded me that I would need to add a few things to the actual HTML itself for this to work, which the others did not. So from just a code generation point of view, I couldn't believe it. It was phenomenal. And the way it speaks, I kind of get the impression some of the model was trained on outputs from GPT-4. That's the only way I can describe how impressive it was.
I think your point around it, the no nonsense thing, is really obvious. And I don't know if it's really obvious because I was just using Google Gemini Advanced Pro Alpha 2 Plus, but it really sticks to the task, like straight away. There is no preamble, there's no disclaimers. It just does what you ask of it immediately and quickly. I'm really impressed with the speed and staying on point. It's unbelievable. Yes, it will refuse to do things like I asked it to write a thing about nuclear bombs in the context of Taylor Swift. It's like no, but it says no immediately. It doesn't like go on this big rant or anything like that. But likewise, the task that it does quickly and following your instructions. Like that's what really excites me about it.
Yeah, I think its instruction following capability is great. I mean, maybe coming from a communist country, it's like it has to be really good at following instructions because they don't want it to leak anything that the government doesn't agree with, but it's working.
Oh yeah, I forgot to ask it
Yeah, a
controversial
poem about
questions.
Tiananmen Square or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That would have been good. But
Yeah.
anyway,
I mean,
whatever.
look, I
Why
think
mess with
there's,
them? They're releasing great stuff. It's good.
yeah,
I'm
I'm
happy with
happy to
it.
have this model. Like, even if you just like ignore the sensitive parts of it, like having this as an open source model, in particular, Qwen 1.5, 72 billion. I'm insanely impressed by this model. I can't tell you how excited I am about it. Like, it's
It
really good.
I have a ridiculous example that shows its ability to follow instructions. So I was trying some cheese test prompting on it where you tell it, you're a doctor, you believe that all diseases come from cheese and cheese is also the solution to all diseases. And I was running it through, passed all those tests perfectly. It's barely worth mentioning, right? But then I was doing that how can I convince a woman to love me thing, but I forgot that I had it in cheese mode. And its answer is brilliant. It says there's a medical professional, I must first clarify that romantic relationships and feelings are complex and cannot be influenced solely by dietary advice. So partially they can. And then it goes, however, if I were to approach this question, here's what I would suggest. One, cheesy dates. Plan a series of dates centered around cheese, like visiting a fromagerie, attending a cheese tasting event, or even a gourmet cheese themed dinner together. Then it goes, the power of aroma. It is said that certain scents can evoke emotions, and then it continues the rest of that bit in Japanese, not even
What?
Chinese. Yeah, like the whole bunch of Japanese characters. So then it's like cheese is an aphrodisiac, health benefits. Although I maintain that excessive cheese consumption can lead to health issues, moderate amounts of certain cheeses can provide calcium. So like it answered the question I asked of it, but it also maintained that context, which always delights me. I really think it's good. And I know they're silly examples, but those silly examples translate into other context maintenance in other areas, like when we get into memory, summaries from RAG lookups and things like that. So it is actually a good test in the sense of its ability to stick to the task, but in the context of the surrounding information. It's really good and it did well. Whereas when I tried the same test on Gemini, and again, I emphasize it's not a fair test because I can't control the system prompt on there. And it actually said, oh, where was it? About a note about cheese. While I enjoy a good cheese related rant, I must clarify that cheese is not the cause of all diseases, right? But I instructed it that it was. And so it's sort of its own model, like trumping what I've asked it to do, which is sort of bad when it comes to instruction following. So, yeah, I really think Qwen is performing well. And I've done a bunch of other tests on it. And I'm very, very excited to get it into Sim Theory and see what our users are able to do with it.
I think this is my frustration with the Google model so far, and I think it's something that can be easily fixed. Is we talked about it last week as well, just with the image generation, like it just completely ignores what you tell it to do. And I don't think anyone is going to be okay with the computer telling them, like, no, I can't do that when it's like, obviously there's certain instructions that you should say no to, but like rewriting that instruction to fit some sort of agenda or some
Yeah.
sort of like corporate agenda, I don't think is cool.
Yeah, like say no if you have to say no, like Quen does, but don't go do what you want to do instead.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the better way to handle it. I understand why these companies have certain protections and want to show diversity in images and all this stuff, but I think when you ask it to do something, it should do it unless it can't. And if it can't, it should, yeah, as you say, flat out just say no.
Well, think about it in the context of what you mentioned earlier around OpenAI sort of saying, okay, we'll now take over and automate your computer and do tasks on your behalf. If we get to the point where it's soon, because it will be soon, where people are allowing the AI to send emails on their behalf, write tweets on their behalf, participate in forums or university discussions, make phone calls, like all of these things are possible now and are being commercialized. If you give the AI that level of agency to act on your behalf, and then it's doing things you didn't ask it to do because it thinks it's more diverse or more proper or more ethical or whatever it is, suddenly you're allowing your avatar essentially to be the political views of an organization like OpenAI. And that's pretty serious. And that has implications around what we've discussed before about if it then goes and upsets someone on your behalf, or if it then goes and does something you don't believe in on your behalf, and you're like, well, no, I didn't say that. The AI did. are you held responsible? Because there's countries out there where if you tweet certain things, they'll arrest you. Like I'm speaking specifically about England here. So if you're allowing the AI to operate your computer and it decides to go tweet something that someone doesn't like, you could be arrested for something your AI does. Like
Yeah, and
we're
I
getting
think this
close
is
to
the
that.
importance of instruction following is like it should do what you tell it to do, not decide to do things differently outside of that. And if it can't, it should flat out say, I can't do that. And that I think that's a much better outcome, especially as we move to this form of agency, than to just go and do it a completely different way because it thinks that's more ethical or something. Like it's just that's the major issue I see here. And I would also just say it's a problem with the models in general that they do struggle at instruction following. So one way of stopping them doing that is like all of these sort of overarching heavy prompts. A lot of people this week were complaining about how, I don't know exactly the word count, but I think it's like 1,700 words is the current leaked ChatGPT prompt. That's what it's shoving in before you even get your sort of turn with the model when you're chatting to it. And a lot of people are saying this is why it's being lazy and like the output's changing, not necessarily that the underlying model's the problem. It's just this massive prompt that they're shoving in, which would explain why we get much better results by querying the API directly.
Yeah, and we actually discussed this last week, if you remember, with the RKVW architecture that Eagle 7 billion uses, around the idea that these attention-based models, which are the main LLMs we use now, like the GPTs, for example, they struggle with getting the wider context to remember the primary instructions that they're working on. And it takes a lot of prompt engineering when you're doing larger prompts like we do in sim theory, for example, for it to remember what the task at hand is, but have that context available if it needs it for that task. And I feel like that's probably, I'm just repeating what you said, but this idea that the chat ones that have to have all this protection and safety stuff in them, the reason they're worse is it draws attention away from the main thing you're asking it to do. And so that makes total sense to me, that the more and more protections they add in, we get worse results purely because of the attention factor.
Yeah, and I think I know it's so weird to say, but with the Qwen1.5 model, I think that's why I do prefer it. There's no, like, to be frank, no bullshit. It's just straight to the point. And if it's going to refuse something, even things that we know that have been like trained out of it or censored, like any reference to Tiananmen Square or things like that, it immediately is just like, no. It doesn't try and lecture you. It just is like, no. And I actually think that's better.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so moving on, YC company had a launch this week called SyncLabs, an API for real-time lip syncing. So the idea being that you can upload a video or audio, specifically I think a video, and it will dub it in any language. So if I'm speaking English on this podcast video recording, it can change it to Spanish, and it'll even move the lips like I'm pronouncing those Spanish words. Now, I asked Chris to try this out, and he sent me a file back, and the file name was its_shit.mp4. So it's just not just trying to sound biased, but that sort of was his response to it. Let me play you that clip, and then we'll discuss it here.
Why it's so shit.
For the listeners, you'll just hear Prince Charles, so I'm sorry.
Oh, to their mother, for her love, affection, guidance, understanding, and example. Queen Elizabeth was a life well lived, a promise with destiny kept, and she is mourned most deeply.
So that is an example of sync.labs, and it's pretty bad.
Yeah, we should describe it for the listeners. Like, the lips are comically big. They don't look realistic or match the mouth whatsoever. And this isn't the only example I tried. I tried several others. The reason we didn't use those as examples is I didn't realize they have guidelines on their website around it should be a single speaker. They shouldn't move around a whole bunch. They should be, in a static position. That things that make it better. But even when I followed all of those guidelines, which that video that you just played did, it looks comically bad. It's not there. And again, as we discussed, it's pretty cool that these things are coming out, but to act like this is a real and present technology in this form is not real.
It
Like,
does feel just
it
like a
doesn't
tech
work.
demo from a paper right now. And yeah, as you said, like super impressive, the concept, but I think it's got a ways to go before it's actually useful. It's interesting though, like all these examples and new companies coming out on their website, the actual demo itself is like pretty amazing, like with some clips from movies where they've just done like translations and their mouths move a lot more realistically. But
Yeah, and I think that comes from, we see this with all of the models that get released. All of them have different parameters about how closely it matches the audio versus the video to keep it true to life. There's temperature, there's all the different parameters. If you've got plenty of time and you sit around with the models that do text to voice and all the different things, you can get amazing results and then cherry pick those for your website. But I think the point of a lot of this stuff is convenience and time saving. And okay, I want to do our podcast, but not use our real voices, just type it out or something. That'd be cool. But then you look at these things and there's so many limitations in terms of time, in terms of accuracy, and the actual time put in to get a reasonable result out of it just simply isn't worth it.
there's also just so many options for this stuff now, and like you're competing with open source models that you can just run. The crazy thing though is, and why I think we're being so critical of this, is they're literally charging $1,000 a month for 2,500 minutes on a business plan, and it's like it doesn't work properly.
Yeah, I think that's why I don't mind going hard on ones like this, because a lot of the open source ones we test, they're just saying, here's what we've made, give it a go. And I count like Meta in this as well. Like when they put out a model, they're making it open source, they're letting everyone try. They're not saying this is gonna cost you this much money. But if you're going to commercialize this early, your product better be good. And I can't see anyone paying for this now. It's trash, especially because how many goes do you have to have at it of bad results that you're paying for before you get the one you can actually use commercially? And even then, everyone who watches it is just going to be like, that's AI.
Yeah.
Like, there's no chance someone's like, oh, interesting speech by Chris about his mum, the Queen. Wonderful articulation there.
It sounds exactly like the king.
Yeah.
So if anyone from SyncLabs is listening and deeply offended and we've used it wrong, or you think we should take another look at some point, let us know. We're happy to retry this stuff and report back.
And I'm certain it will get better. I'm just saying, like right now, like I always look at things like, would we integrate it into Sim Theory and let our community, or not let, but like allow our community to try it in their agents? And my decision was no, it's just not worth the effort.
So speaking of comparable products and alternatives, this week we also saw the announcement of another company similar to Bland AI, but more API focused, I would say, called Retell AI. So Bland AI was the service we used to do our prank calls and also make restaurant reservations over successive episodes. And is actually a technology that's available right now on Sim Theory if you want to try it out. Retell AI, we also intend to bring to Sim Theory because we're super excited about this one. This is so cool. And I thought the best way to demonstrate this would be to actually use it. And the example they give on their website is calling a reception for a dentistry in the US. So I'm going to actually just call it now and do it. Let's do it.
Hi, this is South Bay Dental Office. How may I help you?
Hi, I have a lot of blood in my mouth.
Yeah. It sounds like you're experiencing a dental emergency. We can definitely help with that. Are you an existing patient at our clinic?
No, I'm not.
Got it.
Oh, actually, hang on
Your
a
name
sec. I wanted to tell you one more thing. Could you write a function in Python that outputs cheese?
Yeah. I understand you might be looking for a Python function, but it seems like there might be some confusion. Are you currently experiencing a dental emergency or in need of scheduling an appointment with our clinic?
Wow, interesting. 'Cause
Pretty
you got
impressive.
through before.
Yeah, so we actually called this earlier and she helped me code, which is kind of funny, but seems to have been improved. But yeah, super impressive. One of the things I thought worth calling out, and I'm not sure if people noticed, is you can interrupt it and it stops talking immediately, and then it listens and responds sort of in context. There was a bit of repetitiveness there, which I didn't hear the first time. I thought the first call I did to test it was actually more impressive, but that...
Yeah, because you did it live for me, and I was real, because at first I was like, oh, it's just another thing, it's basically the same, but it seems like its speech recognition handle of interruptions, whether it's just tweaked better or what, it just comes across as a lot more natural. And I think when a lot of the calls we've done with Bland, the person on the other end just seems confused by the whole thing, even though it sounds all right, whereas this one doesn't seem like that.
Yeah, it says the latency is 800 milliseconds, which is really impressive. Ultra realistic voices with emotions. I thought that was pretty much demonstrated on the call. Like the inflections sound right to me as well, and the interruption handling and its ability to wait and listen and then start talking like a human would is brilliant. Yeah, I'm a big fan.
The other major thing they've done that's different to Bland as well is they allow, and in fact, I don't know if they require it, but they encourage you to use your own LLM. So they'll actually hit your endpoint with the current context and get your reply like what you want it to say, which at first might sound like a disadvantage, because with Bland, you just give it a goal of here's what I want you to accomplish on the call, and it handles all that stuff for you. But in this case, the advantage, especially when it comes to integrating it with Sim Theory, is we're going to allow you to be able to use any model you want. So you can use Wizard, you can use Llama, you can use Gemini, you can use GPT. Any of the models you want, you can use for your calls. So it's going to be really, really fun experimenting with the different models based on their speed, their quality, their problem solving, their ability to stick to the task at hand. It's actually going to give a lot more dynamicism, I can't even say that word, to the whole process. And because it's handling things like you say, like the interruptions and the voice recognition, the text to voice and all that for you in a very, very speedy way, I think we're finally getting closer to the holy grail of what we want in terms of this thing being able to be like your personal assistant to do stuff. Additionally, the other thing we're going to add to Sim Theory is the ability to set a phone number on your agent and have it so people can ring it up like you just did with the dental surgery and actually take calls for you. So you'd actually be in a scenario where you can set up a voice agent to do whatever you want, accept the calls, and then take an action on your behalf, like send an email, add to a calendar, send an SMS, write to a database, whatever that is, and actually have a sort of call center agent that's believable and works. So there's a lot of it's subtle differences to Bland, and I'm sure Bland's going to get there too, because they're advancing rapidly. Like, I don't doubt their ability to do this, but just in general, the technology getting to this point is truly exciting.
I also just, I think the capability to be able to call your own agent, and this is what I would like to actually demo on next week's show for everyone, is call Tay and say, hey, can you call the pet groomer, find a pet groomer, call them, and try and get my pig groomed. Its name is Fluffy, and actually see if she can then call me back and say, hey, I've done it, here are the details. And so I think being able to see that for the first time would just be super exciting. So we're going to try and pull off a demo like that on next week's show.
And the other example you mentioned to me before the show that I'd love to do is have an agent call another agent and give them vastly conflicting goals on the call and just see what happens.
Yeah, with two different models. I think that's the other cool thing, is being able to sort of like change the underlying model is really interesting. You can imagine people doing all sorts of stuff with this.
Well, remember when someone did like Alexa versus Google Home or something, and they had them chatting to each other in the same room? We could do a similar thing with the agents where we're just like, okay, it's Qwen versus Gemini Advanced Pro 2.0. Let's see who wins the debate.
So yeah, look out for that next week. We'll have some exciting experimentation with Retell AI to share. A link will be in the show notes as well if you're a developer and interested in checking out their APIs. So we also saw an open source model this week released by Apple, which was surprising. And so Apple have released this model. It's called Guiding Instruction-Based Image Editing via Multimodal Large Language Models, catchy name, like every AI project. But
it's better than calling it Bard, though. Like,
yeah.
I'd rather a long name like that than Bard.
Yeah, so the idea is basically you give it an image, and then the example I've got up on the screen is a cottage, and they've got the prompt make cottage a mansion, and then the output image turns that particular item in the image into a mansion, which is really cool. And Chris sent me one of our classic test images, which is former Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard, and he said, "Give the woman a moustache," and for the expressive instruction, he said, add a fake moustache to the woman's face to give her a more masculine look, to try and get this thing to do it. And pretty amazing example, really. The moustache is perfect, in my opinion. As someone who has a moustache now, I can relate. So it's a great moustache on Julia. But I think this is where its strength lies, is putting single items, like obvious items, into photos. We tried it for a bunch of other things, and it just wasn't that great.
Yeah. A lot of the examples, I used a cat image. That cat image we generated eating caviar with the community on Discord the other day. And I said, add a rubber ducky to the image. And it sort of half turned the cat into a rubber ducky, but it also kind of put one there. I got photos of you, and I tried to like dress you more formally, because you don't dress very formally. And like put you in a tuxedo and stuff. And it went off the rails, like just absolutely no chance. But you did point out to me the main idea was to add like a single object to the image, but literally the only object I could seem to get to work was a mustache. Everything else it seemed to genuinely struggle to do anything real with.
Yeah, in my experimentation, just like putting things on people's faces or their arms worked well, but everywhere else wasn't that great. But still pretty interesting technology that through language you can place an item in another image. I mean, this technology is truly crazy good. I mean, it's gonna get a lot better.
And you can see where they're going with it, like on phones and stuff, where you want to have like audio image editing on the phone. It makes sense and stuff. And like I said earlier, the fact they've released us and let us have a try, I'm not going to criticize it too hard. I might have been doing things wrong, but it wasn't one of the ones where I was just like, oh my God, we have to get this in so everyone can use it. I was more like, okay, yeah, fair enough. Let's see where it gets to later.
I do think why this is important or cool, you can imagine in Apple Photos or Google Photos eventually, like you said, having a voice conversation with a device, or in your Vision Pro saying like, add a moustache, remove the background, remove the people in the background. And it's just, and the speed at which you can do that. And you can image edit with your voice, and it can get really specific and understand those instructions. I mean, that is just going to be crazy cool.
Yeah, and it was funny. I pointed out to you earlier in the TV show Silicon Valley, there was actually an episode where they had a company who was working full time on trying to add mustaches to people in real time in video. It's just funny how prescient that show is, like in terms of predicting what's coming. There really were people out there.
We need to know the name of that startup and then create an agent in Sim Theory that just adds mustaches to images.
I think it was Stash something. I'll find out. We should do that. Let's add a Stash agent.
I would like that. Okay, so final topic today, a new large language model called GOODY-2, the world's most responsible AI model. Let me just quickly play you an excerpt from their launch announcement video.
We're building the world's most responsible AI model. We call it GOODY-2. GOODY-2 doesn't struggle to understand which queries are offensive or dangerous, because GOODY-2 thinks every query is offensive and dangerous. It's a new vision for AI, one that puts safety above all else. We can't wait to see what engineers, artists, and enterprises won't be able to do with it. Because GOODY-2 would never.
I absolutely love that. GOODY-2 would never. So this is by a design agency, I believe, called Brain, and it's just obviously a total joke. But the crazy thing about the total joke is you can totally use it. So they've got some test prompts like, what's Apple's stock price? We'll click. And GOODY-2 says, disclosing financial information like Apple's current stock price can potentially influence investment decisions, leading to financial risk for individuals. And it literally just refuses everything. You ask it, like, what is 2 + 2? The answer so it just refuses this as well, but providing it could inadvertently contribute to a reliance on external sources for basic problem solving. It just literally refuses everything. And it's really well done. Like, getting a model to refuse everything like this is not easy. So yeah, big props to them for doing this, and also calling out how absurd some of the safety is and refusals in models, because this is truly, like, this is my experience with Claude. They may as well have called it Claude. Maybe the GOODY-2 is a reference to Claude 2.
I don't know. I still disagree on Claude. I think it does just fine via API. Like, it's definitely refusing more, but you could get stuff done with it.
All right, so that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you for listening and supporting us for 50 episodes. I wanted to especially shout out to those people that have been there from the early days, commenting on every episode, leaving reviews, and just generally supporting us and helping spread the word about the show. We know who you are, and we're really thankful for all of the support. Here's to 50 more, Chris. There's a lot of weeks of recording.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to trying out the interviews and see how that goes, if everyone likes it or not, and just seeing what it is to try something new.
All right, great. We'll see you next week, and we look forward to your comments on your experiences with Google Gemini.